Okay, thank you for attending this meeting. This is the SAE Shop Safety Training Meeting. Everyone that will continue working the shop is required to watch this semesterly training video or attend the lecture. Safety is a very vital importance to our shop. Failure to meet any of these points can mean thousands of dollars worth of fines to our shop. And as you can imagine, with the monetary situation that we're in some years, that some fines like this could mean that we may not be able to attend competition, or in a worst case scenario that it may shut down our program. There's been labs on campus that have received $100,000 worth of fines, and to our organization, a fine that huge could potentially shut down our program for a very long time.
Yeah, and Dylan's not exaggerating. 2 years ago, our physical plant department on campus, they're the ones that do all the maintenance in the buildings and basically take care of the campus for us. They were caught using an aerosol spray can of brake clean outside their building, and the residue that was letting fall into the soil, and they received a $100,000 fine for that single violation. So it's going to be very serious very quickly. That's why we need to all do our part, make sure that we're respecting our environment here and enforcing the policies that environmental health and safety, the HNS, have set up for us to do so.
Okay, so with that, we'll start going through the points in this document. Most of them are related to chemical safety, which includes storage and usage, as well as chemical waste, both of which are key points that are easy to violate in the shop, and we need to make sure we follow these. There's also some points relating to general shop training, equipment use, and those will be later in the document. We're going to start off with chemical safety. So the first point is all chemical containers must have labels, and you should not be using abbreviations on these labels. So any chemical that is brought into the shop must have a clear label on it. If say you're working with resin or Bondo, and some of the Bondo falls onto the label and covers up part of the name, you're responsible for either cleaning up that residue or putting a new label on. Without a label on the chemical, someone may not know what it is. While you may know it's Bondo, if there's, say, a fire or a big leak from that bottle, someone may not know how to clean it up properly because it's not clearly labeled. And abbreviations are avoided so that anyone that's dealing with the chemical knows exactly what it is. While you may think an abbreviation is common and it's used every day in the shop, someone outside the shop may not know that abbreviation yet. So it's vital to print the full name on the label. Number 2, original certified containers should always be used for storage. If the original container is damaged or unavailable, you must use a container made of an identical material composition or a steel container. For an example, using a water jug to store oil is unacceptable. Use what was given or an acceptable replacement, or that chemical should not be in the shop. Dispose of it properly. The point's that easy.
Who can tell us why that's inappropriate? Like, what's the risk there if we use a plastic water jug for storing oil? For anybody that's done that? Yes.
The oil will eventually corrode the plastic water bottle to the point where it breaks on the bottom. It still looks structurally sound, and so you notice that all the oil is in the pool below the bottle, not in the bottle.
Right.
Same thing happens with fuel and like Coke cans and such. So
it causes it to become brittle and crack. Yeah.
Okay, third point. Secondary containment, or containment hub, is a safeguard method used to prevent unplanned releases of hazardous chemicals into uncontrolled work areas. All secondary containers must be labeled to identify the contents inside as well as health risks. So the importance of this is to ensure that there is no chemical spill from the container you're using. So what you'll see in the shop, for what we mainly use these for, is chemical hazardous waste storage. So as I'll point out later, all hazardous waste must be stored in a secondary containment hub to prevent spills. Likewise, if you're pouring a chemical into, say, a bottle, you need to make sure that that bottle is in some sort of secondary containment hub to prevent it from spilling onto the ground. So we want to try to avoid spills as much as possible. A spill, say, onto an electrical socket is a bad idea, or is an unplanned hazard. Say you're pouring it on the table. Obviously you don't plan to have it go into the socket, but if it spills and then splashes onto the wall, you could potentially have an electrical fire from some sparking that would occur.
So for secondary containment, we really have two items this applies to. We have two 5-gallon plastic containers. One is labeled to hold oil waste, whether it's used oil or brake fluids, oils, lubricants. And the second one is for basically general solvents. So what Dylan's talking about here with the secondary containment is that this 5-gallon container, this 5-gallon bucket that holds the waste as we generate it, it just sits inside the secondary container. So if this does burst, break, or rupture, then the fluid obviously is going to safely be contained. So this is going to be maybe a 7 or 8 gallon container. They're marked, it's marked yellow right now, so they'll be clearly visible in the shop.
Mm-hmm. And that secondary container, if you're storing chemicals in it, must be 110% greater by volume than the primary container. Fourth point, MSDS, material safety data sheets, must be readily available for every chemical stored on UF property. This includes the energy park. So if you're bringing a new chemical into the shop or out at the energy park, you must bring an MSDS with it. In fact, we're saying policy that you should bring 2 as well as an electronic copy. One copy will be stored at the shop, the other will be stored at the energy park. That way, if the chemical is ever brought out to the energy park for storage or usage, that the MSDS is already there. Or likewise, if you're bringing it from the energy park to the shop, we'll have it available. And the electronic copy will be placed on the computer by the shears, just so that's another way of easy access, but we always want the hard copy. When EHS does the inspection, they want to see the hard copy because that's always available, and a computer can crash at any time, but the hard copy should always be there. If for some reason you see a spill on some of the papers, please notify someone or take the responsibility yourself to print out a new copy of it, which again will be found on all the shop computers. And you may think MSDS are only for hazardous chemicals such as gasoline, acetone. In fact, an MSDS is available for most anything that's brought into the shop. You can find an MSDS for sunblock. Virtually anything has the MSDS. If it's brought into the shop, bring an MSDS with it. To find an MSDS, it's usually not that hard. All you have to do is search the chemical name and the brand name as well to find the more specific one for the chemical we have, and search MSDS with it. A lot of companies have a dedicated spot on their website for where they have the MSDS sheets for their material, or there's also some website specifically dedicated to MSDS. So
this is a really important point. If the chemical is not fit for human consumption, basically if you wouldn't eat that normally, feel that you're going to turn out all right in 10 years, the company is required by law to provide the end user MSDS, so they're always available. You just do a quick Google search, you can find it. So even if you go to the store and it's 12 o'clock, you go to Walmart and you come back with super glue. Again, we don't always associate chemicals and MSDSs with common items we use around us, so it doesn't matter what it is. Right now, Dylan's taken the last 2 or 3 weeks, and he's had some of your help to do inventory, to find MSDS data sheets for all the chemicals that we currently have. But if somebody brings something in and we don't have it, then it's binary. Passing this inspection is binary. They just have to find one thing we didn't have the MSDS for. They don't really care to look at all the other 60 chemicals that we did. So we all have to do our part to find the MSDS sheets when we bring something into the shop. Second comment, we all know where the yellow chemical storage cabinet is. The MSDS sheets, there's a clearly labeled notebook on top of the cabinet. So if you have to use it, make sure you put it back there so it's always right there with the chemicals.
yes. Okay. Number 5, an accurate and current inventory must be maintained for all chemicals. So anytime you bring a new chemical in, you're going to have to fill out on an inventory sheet what chemical you brought in. Again, no abbreviations, and how much. With that, if you're using a chemical, say some lube assembly, and you run out of 1 bottle and there's still 3 remaining, please update the sheet corresponding to how much we still have in the shop. When EHS comes by, they want to see an inventory of what we have, so they know if there's, say, potential hazard, they can see how much of the chemicals may be in there to know how to deal with the situation properly. If there's an ounce of one chemical, that may not present a hazard. But if there were, say, a gallon or more of it stored, that's obviously more of a potential risk, especially if it's flammable. So always update the inventory. Now, something such as acetone will commonly have 1 can in the shop, and we'll replace it when the other one's getting low. So for that, it's not as necessary to cross it off and put 0 and then put 1 later, because typically we'll end up having 1 bottle in the shop at a time. If you feel that we're not going to have that bottle of acetone in there for quite some time, it would be necessary to put that we don't have any of it in the shop, or in fact just cross it out completely, just so if there is any hazardous situation going on, that the people taking care of it know that there is no acetone in there. But it is important to update it when a new bottle is brought in.
Any questions so far? Okay, this is meant to be a dialogue, so don't feel like you're interrupting us. We want to answer your questions. Something doesn't make sense, or first time you're hearing it, which is the case for a lot of us. Most of us haven't worked somewhere where we've had to really be concerned with this stuff, so don't hesitate to ask questions. Okay, that takes us on to rules for chemical storage. Starting out, we don't want to store chemicals above shoulder height, because that presents a risk when you are taking the chemicals out of the cabinet. So the example I used last time we had this meeting a week ago was a friend was taking a gallon container out of a chemical storage cabinet, and it had been in there for so long that the steel can had actually corroded to the point that when she took it off the shelf, the bottom fell out of the container. So obviously, if it's under you, that's going to fall right on you. So it's rare that we're prepared for that, but you never want to stack it over shoulder height for that reason. Also, it's heavier than you anticipate. Obviously, that's going to allow somebody that's not real strong to drop it, and that's going to end up with with an uncontrolled spill. Second point here says don't stack chemicals, and that's something they look for when they come through and do their inspections. Okay, and they can do those inspections at any time. So by stacking them, you can have if a container does break, obviously you're going to have 2 chemicals that potentially could combine if the one underneath it is not sealed completely, and it just makes it harder to prevent. I guess I should say stacking chemicals makes it easier, to have an uncontrolled spill in the cabinet if something does fall off, because somebody just closes the cabinet door when they put something else back. If it's stacked, something else is stacked, it can fall off.
Even if it's 2 small containers of the same chemical, for instance, Mother's Polish, which is a small container about that size, you're not allowed to stack those. Again, closing the cabinet can cause it to fall off onto each other and knock something else off, or knock something else over, and now we have a game of dominoes going on in the chemical storage cabinet, and that could knock over something that may not be sealed properly or is not meant to be stored on its side at all, and that could cause a chemical spill.
Okay, next point says chemicals without legible labels can't be stored or disposed of. So that means that anytime we can't read the label, we have to resolve it. We have to fix that. So we need to clearly identify what the material is. Even if we decide as a team, well, we don't need this anymore. We cannot let EH&S come and get it. We can't ask them to dispose of it, and we can't take it somewhere in good conscience and ask them to properly dispose of it if they don't know what it is. So we must label it. Again, Dylan's taking care to make sure that everything does have visible labels, but as users, we're the ones that have to continue to enforce this. We can't have one person coming along annually trying to suddenly update us so that we can pass inspection. This is something that we have to do as daily users of our facility. Yeah, so we have to do this immediately upon first sign that the label is becoming unreadable. C says ensure that the caps and lids are securely tight to prevent leaks and evaporation of contents. That's something that they do when they come by to do their inspections. They're going to grab some chemicals. They're going to see if they can pull the lids off. They're going to make sure that the screw-on lids are tight on chemicals that are volatile. So we need to make sure that we're putting the lids on mindfully, and that goes for like gallon containers. If you're using something and you get a bunch of product in the groove for the lid, and you try and put the lid on, that's going to prevent the lid from sealing. So you would need to take a rag and remove that material that's in the groove, and make sure that you use a hammer and securely put the lid on completely, so that if it does get knocked over, you're confident that it will seal. D says bottles can't be stored on the floor unless they're placed in secondary containment tubs. So obviously if it's on the floor, somebody can kick it over. So it's not a matter of if it ever happens, it's when it happens. Because again, we have a lot of people using our facility, and accidents are going to continue to happen. So if we have a secondary containment tub, that can make sure to obviously to contain the chemical, so that we can clean it up in a controlled manner. Flammable chemicals in amounts exceeding 10 gallons in one room must be stored in flammable storage cabinets or safety containers. So we have one of these. This applies to us. We have more than 10 gallons of flammable product. So that's why we have our big yellow chemical storage cabinet. 55-gallon drums aren't allowed unless we get approval by EH&S, and we have to jump through some hoops to be able to secure that material properly, because obviously that's a lot of product that, if it is flammable, can cause a very serious explosion. So they definitely want to work with anybody that's using those types of that volume, that quantity of material, to tell them the additional safety guidelines they need to follow in order to mitigate the chance of causing a very serious accident in a building. This doesn't really apply to us though. In the past, we had a 55-gallon drum of brake clean in the shop. Yeah, it just showed an example of how wasteful we can be too, because we went through that in about the same amount of time as we'd go through 2 or 3 cases of a brake clean. So it was like a brake clean party. We use it for everything. These gallons that was here or there. Now we wouldn't be able to do this. So if you're doing sponsorship and a company wants to give us 55 gallons of product, we would kindly ask if they could give us 5 or 2 or 3 single-gallon containers instead. Chemical waste. G. Chemical waste should be placed at the designated waste accumulation area. In appropriate receptacles, properly labeled, and segregated by hazard class. So all this means is that in the shop there's going to be an area for the lab and an area for SAE where there's a sign that says hazardous waste accumulation area. And at the bottom of that you'll see a steel pan, and it'll have containers that are marked. So let's say we use some, whether it's our solvents container or we use something else that it's pretty much, we decide we're not going to use this anymore, let's get rid of it safely, properly. So we're going to have it properly labeled, put it over there, and when that area gets above the accepted level, then we would either call the EH&S to pick it up, or we would take it to an authorized recycle center in town. Okay, so anything that needs to be disposed of has to be in that one location by that's designated as the waste accumulation site. You can't have just multiple containers around the lab. And the stuff that's waste shouldn't be stored in the chemical storage cabinet either. It should be out in that accumulation area so that it can be disposed of in a timely fashion.
Yes, Carl?
Does EH&S charge us money if we have them pick it up? Because I know if we take it to a recycling place ourselves, they charge us like $15-20, depending on what it is.
Well, it depends where we go in town. So EH&S won't, their job is to help us, so we should never be fearful of the cost to dispose of things properly through the department, through the university. Our department's happy to pick up the tab for us doing that. They're happy to see that we're being responsible users, and we actually had some waste that we got rid of in the right manner. So excellent question. And about twice a year, Gainesville has a hazardous waste material collection call where they have it set up, because they know that as like individual users, a lot of people, if they have stuff in their garage, they don't want to pay to get disposed of. So they have these set up biannually where they don't charge anything. All you have to do is over that weekend take those materials out there and ask that you have them labeled. So if we just watch where those dates are, that will be for sure an easy and free way for us to dispose of anything that we need to properly. H, chemicals should not be stored indefinitely. If we don't need something, then dispose of it properly. So obviously I'm not saying go in the cabinet, if you didn't use it in the last week, get rid of it, right? Because we know we have a lot of users doing different things. But by performing an annual chemical assessment, kind of like when we clean up the shop to get ready for the new season, we organize, we get rid of stuff that is deemed collectively as unnecessary, not usable again in the future, just wasting space. The same thing with chemicals. If we realize that we haven't used something in 5 years, that's probably a good indicator that we can get rid of it and not miss it. The next one says segregate incompatible chemicals. And basically this says that there are, actually I'll let Dylan talk about this one because he knows a little more about it.
Okay, so to finish what this point says, we segregate the chemicals to prevent inadvertent mixing of incompatible chemicals which can produce harmful gases, vapors, heat, fire, and explosions. And there's a table at the end of this document to show segregation by hazardous class. If only it was on one slide.
It wasn't on one page. Now we blew it up. It doesn't like it. But it just tells us, it gives us a list on the paper copies that we'll have in the lab. It's easier to read. If Dylan will quit scrolling for a second. It's easy to read. It just tells you, if you see it across the top and you see the intersection on the left-hand column, that those chemicals should not be stored together. Okay, so because the potential of the mixing might be an exothermic reaction, could create an explosion or other undesirable side effects. For us, this would apply to such things as, let's say, two-part materials, where you mix a catalyst or an activator with a base product, and they give you a usable chemical. So we would want to purposely store those either in separate cabinets, or if you store them in a cabinet, this might seem odd the first time. Dylan will correct me if I'm wrong. You want to store them on the same shelf, but we want to use steel, almost like cookie sheets, steel containers that the items are stored in separately. So if one ruptures, there's no chance of it getting outside this container or dripping down to a lower shelf and reacting with something that it shouldn't.
Right. And if possible, try to use something larger than a cookie tray. I say this because even though a cookie tray can contain the spill, if, say, all the chemicals from that container are leaking out, if there's an unknown hole in it, say the bottom of it corroded and a hole formed in there, say in both the containers, part A, part B, they could then spill the cookie tray and then react exothermically. A common example of two chemicals that react exothermically that we have in our shop would be part A and part B for some composites. So ideally we want them separated completely in different cabinets. With these, you want the hardeners put in the fire cabinet because it has a lower flash point. The lower flash point means it will combust at a lower temperature. So obviously that's more of a concern for us to put in the fire cabinet because that would be the first chemical to ignite. So if you can't separate them in cabinets, just make sure that they're on the same shelf, as Mike said, to avoid one chemical dripping down and going onto the other, and that they're in appropriate tubs to contain any spill that may occur. Okay, and that brings us to point 7, which is rules for chemical handling. Yes.
In working with incompatible chemicals, avoid bringing any chemicals that have some kind of liquid chlorine as part of the chemical. Like the brake clean, we always use non-chlorinated brake clean because if you were to use it on something hot, like to clean off an area prior to welding it or something like that, if it gets hot enough that liquid chlorine becomes chlorine gas, and there's plenty of various stories online of people doing that same thing, like cleaning something, then going to weld it or going to work on it. It gets hot, creates chlorine gas, and then they end up in the hospital. So
sometimes deathly ill from a single exposure.
If you see things like that, I say we need to just avoid all forms of liquid chlorine And I feel that kind of falls with the segregating the chemicals out.
And nobody is going to be a chemical expert. Well, there might be a chemical engineer in training, a couple hopefully among our group, but yet none of us are chemical experts. So assessing how to store things properly and what the specific risks are is something that's well done in a team environment. So the rest of the team is here, and I'm always here to ask questions too. And if I don't know the answer, I'm not going to blow smoke, but I'll be able to find somebody at H&S that can advise us appropriately.
Okay, so rules for chemical handling. Never use chemicals alone. This is related to never use a mill or lathe alone. The same thing, if something happens to you while using the mill and you get hurt, no one's there to attend you. Something similar can happen as far as, well not necessarily similar with injuries, but you can still be injured while using chemicals. So it's easy for, even if you're spraying brake clean and you have safety glasses on, some of the brake clean can splash off the part over your safety glasses and then drip down from, say, your forehead into your eye, or say both eyes. And if that's the case, you may not be able to find where any of the eye washing stations are, so you may be wandering around through the shop essentially blind and in pain, knocking some of the chemicals over, some parts, creating more of a mess. It's just a bad idea.
That's a true story. That happened to one of our members. So he was warned about just how high a velocity the brake clean come out of the can at, and let his guard down. Just needed one quick squirt, is what he said. And yeah, he blinded himself, couldn't keep his eye open, and if we hadn't been there to take him outside and run his eye under the water for a couple minutes, then it may have been a worse injury for him, rather than just an hour of inconvenience.
Likewise, if you're ever working under anything that has chemicals stored in it, for an example, working underneath our car, always wear safety glasses. Even if you trust our oiling system enough to not leak even a single drop, it may leak a single drop while you're under it. It's happened before in the shop where one time one of our members forgot to put safety glasses on just to go under the car to check something on the exhaust, and some oil ended up dripping off the pan into his eyes. So that one time where he was under the car for a planned 30 seconds, he ended up getting oil in his eyes, and he wasn't able to see. We had to escort him to one of the eye washing stations, and even after a couple minutes of washing his eyes out thoroughly, which you're supposed to do that for 15 minutes to make sure that it's completely flushed out, he was still in pain and it was hard for him to see. So he ended up having to walk to the other side of the shop just to get to the station. Imagine trying to do that by yourself, blind and in pain. It's probably not going to happen, at least not safely.
The next one is laboratory coats must be worn over personal clothing and exposed skin when chemical substances are being used. They should be fastened clothes, long enough cover down beneath your knees. You should always wear pants and long sleeves. So again, I don't think anybody comes in the shop thinking, oh, I think it would be nice to spill some chemicals on me today. It happens by accident. That's why it's called that. And we can mitigate the risks by dressing appropriately. So if you know you're doing something that's going to involve etching plugs, then make sure that you're wearing some pants, or I would advise the team to buy a couple large pairs of pants that we just keep in there that you go to the bathroom and change into if you are handling that and you realize that you came dressed inappropriately, because you're going to get some of these things on your skin if you don't protect yourself. So what we're doing, I'll be ordering some lab coats. I meant to have them after last week's meeting. I just forgot. So we'll have lab coats that are hanging on the apron rack that you can use for this purpose. If you're doing something like working with the acid, another good precaution, in addition to wearing a lab coat and of course eye protection, is to go ahead and take a 5-gallon bucket, put some water in it, so that if something does happen and you splash it, you get some of it on your hand where you should be wearing gloves. But if you get something on bare skin, then you can immediately dunk that part of your body in the water before you have you receive any serious injury. Yes.
One thing that we don't really have in the shop, at least as far as I know, is acid-resistant gloves. So that might be something to investigate. Yep.
And we talk about that. So we're going to buy some, buy probably 2 pairs. because you're right, the nitrile gloves are not suitable. The acid would quickly
lasts for about
dissolve
2
those.
seconds.
Yeah, so it's questionable whether or not you can even get them off your hands in time, right? Yeah, so we're going to, but we just gotta go to Lowe's and get some dishwashing gloves. But that's absolutely right. We need to invest in some PPE, some personal protective equipment, so that we can all enforce these rules safely.
Right, and always plan for, or always think ahead of what to do in case there's a spill. So with chemical handling, say you're carrying some chemicals over to the backside of the shop, keep in mind what you're going to do if there's a spill. If you, say, drop a bottle of acetone and it opens and spills on the ground, you should know already what you're going to do in that case. Obviously, just some small paper towels aren't going to clean it up, so there's some large absorbent towels that you could get from the shop to put on to help pick up the spill quickly, take them off to it. We also have a spill kit that's located above the fire cabinet. You just need to be aware of what you do in case of a chemical spill. And all spills must be cleaned up immediately. Spills, whether it's water or the chemical that you're using, hazardous chemicals, any type of substance needs to be cleaned up immediately.
Flammable liquids must be dispensed and used in a well-ventilated area so that the vapors don't accumulate. So in our shop, that means using one of the 2 ceiling-mounted exhaust fans. There's one in the wood shop area, and there's one in the welding shop area. Or setting up one of the portable fans to ensure that the fumes don't accumulate. If you're dispensing chemicals using the exhaust fan in the welding shop, I would say it's called the welding shop for a reason, right? It's set up so we can do welding, we can do things that generate hot sparks and molten metal, and we would know, just common sense now, after sitting through this meeting, that, God bless you, that that would not be the location for dealing with chemicals. So in this case, just because of the logistics, the amount of space that we have, since that's where one of our exhaust fans is mounted, then you need to make sure that you're responsible for let me rephrase that. You are responsible for ensuring that no welding or like using a plasma cutter or anything else that's generating heat is taking place while you have the chemicals out of the storage cabinet and in the welding shop.
And if you're using one of the portable exhaust fans, always be aware of where you're blowing those fumes to. Say you're working in the wood shop area doing some composites work, and you set up the fan to blow the fumes away from your work area, you may be blowing those fumes into the lab table area, which will then go into the computer area by the mills. It can go everywhere but you're working. I've seen that happen before where working at the lab tables, it's just a horrible smell that was getting me dizzy. Then I'd walk over to where the work was being done, and to my surprise, it barely smelled over there, despite that being the source of the fumes. So you should always be aware of where you're directing the fumes to, and so obviously the best solution is to use the exhaust fan, because it will pick up those fumes and disperse them to a safer place rather than dispersing it to the rest of the shop. Luther.
Big thing I think when you're talking about it is anytime we do engine idle or engine testing to make sure that the engine's running before we take it out of the shop to go testing, those fumes build up quickly in the shop, and the exhaust fan, if not like consciously placed, and if we don't shift the car closer towards the back of the garage door, those fumes quickly go right around at it into the welding shop and then back through the rest of the lab, and anyone next to the car doesn't really notice the difference, but everyone else is feeling dizzy and making it harder for work for them.
Right. Even with the car on idle and the garage door open, exhaust facing the garage door, almost out into the open air, there's been times where we haven't set up the exhaust fan, and Mike has come out complaining to us saying he's smelling all these exhaust fumes.
In my office.
Yes, all the way in his office,
So
the
they travel
complete
by
other
there.
side of the shop. Kyle?
Yeah, and that's carbon monoxide that it's actually putting out because we don't have a catalytic converter at all. So
It's
we
bad
almost
for you.
definitely have the exhaust gases.
Okay, next one says always dispense chemicals over a steel, here we're using an example, a steel cookie tray to contain spills in your work area. So again, plan for this because it's going to happen to you one time when you're dispensing chemicals. So be prepared. Don't dispense them over just a tabletop, over just an empty, over the floor, over your work area, because when it does spill, now it's going to be a lot harder to clean it up before it actually gets somewhere that you can't remove it, like absorbed into one of the butcher block tables or into the floor. If you're doing it outside, obviously, then it could get somewhere where again we can't clean it up. So always use some type of steel sheet, steel tray, with the plan that if this gets knocked over or goes south, that it will contain the spill, so that you can clean all of it up in a responsible manner.
So are we gonna buy some of those?
Yeah, we're gonna buy some from Target or Walmart. We'll have them different sizes. So just grab one. They will sit. I think the best place is right on top of the chemical storage cabinet. So we'll have a little shelf up here. We'll have a couple trays. Just grab one. Dispense over those. Never use containers open while working, and immediately return them to the chemical storage cabinets after each use. This is one that's easy to violate. You think, okay, I'm using some acetone and I'm doing some work with it, and I'm going to use it again in 5 minutes. So you can forget and just leave or consciously just leave the top off it. Obviously, that's going to allow some material to evaporate. But here's the much bigger risk. Because you're students, you have flexible schedules, you have things that come up quickly. So if you're doing that and you have the lid off and you have the best intentions to use it again in 3 minutes, you get a phone call, you got to go help somebody, you can step out, and you can easily see how you can leave the shop, leave that container open, and now it can go south from there. To an example, just to where it's left opened all night. Next morning, Murphy tells us that's when we'll have an inspection, or even worse, somebody's working around it and they knock it over. Obviously, now we have we have a bunch of chemical that we're trying to clean up. So immediately after using it, put the lid back on it.
Yes. AJ, you had a question or comment for the previous point?
This is a question kind of relating to something I saw. Where was, maybe I just didn't hear it, but where was the waste accumulation area in the shop?
It will be designated. Right now, the containers are stored by the bay door on our side of the shop by the laser table. We may move it to the other side by the welding area, separated by the
Curtain?
Yes, by the curtain. I'm trying to figure out which is the best spot to locate it, because obviously over by the welding shop, we don't necessarily want it there, but we also have some of our safety stuff by the laser table. So a sign will be posted up in the shop designating it as the satellite waste accumulation area. So that will show you where it should be. And if it ever changes, you'll see that the sign has moved. So always put the waste containers back at that spot.
Final point about E before we move on is the second part where it says immediately return them to the chemical storage cabinets after each use. This is something that is can cause a problem in our particular work environment, because we use some solvents. We use, for instance, acetone for prepping materials before they're being welded, and this can again, it could cause a serious accident if somebody's using the acetone. They clean some parts, they move the acetone bottle to where they think it's far enough away. The acetone can is sitting over here. They put the lid back on it. They continue welding. Somebody else turns around and says, "Oh, I need some acetone." They're on their way over. They say, "Oh, here's the acetone bottle." So they pick it up, dispense what they need, start talking to their friends, start looking at who's welding, and then they put it down, and it starts to get closer and closer to where the welding's going on. And then finally someone else comes over and picks up the MIG welder and starts welding on something over here, again because they saw welding going on, and now a spark can get into an unopened container, or if we're using a plastic dispenser, obviously the spark's going to go right through that plastic and ignite that bottle of material. This is something that we just have to be disciplined about. It means get a little more walking if you're doing welding, because you're often cleaning parts quite a bit when you are welding. But we need to keep them safely in the cabinet so that there's no risk of us igniting that volatile chemical. F says keep only small quantities of flammable materials available for immediate use, so half a liter or less. So this is done using the plastic dispenser bottles. So we'll have a couple of those bottles on hand, so you can use those as necessary. And it says, the next one says large amounts should not be stored out on open bench tops. So the same thing, we need to keep large quantities in the chemical storage cabinets, dispense them immediately into a smaller container, and that's what would be used in the work area.
Does that include the acetone? So that would be put in smaller bottles?
You wouldn't want to put the acetone in a smaller bottle unless it has a lid on it, because it will just evaporate in the air. It's not that difficult to just put it back in the cabinet when you're using it. It's really not that much additional work. But if you do happen to have a bottle with a sealed lid that's also appropriate for storing acetone, so it's one of the points that we mentioned earlier, that you should only use the original container or the appropriate container that can hold that type of substance. So if you have that type of container poured in pour a small amount in, that would be acceptable. But make sure that that container is sealed and can hold that liquid.
So the answer to your question is that yes, it would apply to acetone. We can't leave a gallon of acetone sitting out, day after day. But if we had a half-liter container of acetone, it would not violate EH&S policy to leave that half-liter, that small acetone bottle or can, sitting out. For us, we're going to, again, keep the chemicals in the cabinet. So if you find yourself using it, use it regularly, then we need to put it in a smaller container.
And it is a good idea to always put the chemical back into the fire cabinet when you're even if you're going to use it in a few minutes, aside from the point that Mike stated, with a few minutes may turn to 30 minutes based on getting a phone call. And as he mentioned with welding, I've seen before where someone left a bottle of acetone on one of the welding tables and proceeded to start welding, even though the bottle of acetone was about, say, 3 to 5 feet away from the welding area. The bottle was on the metal table. Metal conducts heat, even though it's a large metal table. For all we know, that'd be enough to heat up the container over time and cause an explosion. So it's a good idea to always take the chemicals and put them back in the cabinet to ensure that there are no fires, there are no spills, we don't have an excessive amount of chemicals laying out in the shop at all.
For when we do get inspected,
Yes. Absolutely.
So it's just, that's the policy we're going to enforce. Keep the chemicals in the cabinet when you're not using them, put them back.
Right, and not just for inspections. These rules are here for a reason. They're here for safety. So, of course, we want to try to do our best for the inspection, but we also want to try to uphold all these rules every single time we're in the shop. They're set for a reason. As strict as some of them may be, we should always follow them as thoroughly as we can.
Yeah, 4 graduate students in the last year have died in university labs from violating a couple of these rules. So that's how serious it can be. It's not just something that can send you to the hospital, which obviously is a huge disaster, but something that can kill us.
Right, and some may not have been from just ignoring the rules. Sometimes it's been ignorance of these rules. So one case that Mike pointed out in our previous meeting was some girl at another university was dealing with some chemicals, wasn't wearing an appropriate lab coat or a lab coat at all, and she spilled the chemicals on her body. Later, she ended up dying due to...
She mixed the chemicals and it exploded, and then everything, like all the chemicals got in her body, right?
Yes.
So they concluded that even a lab coat could have been the difference between her pulling out of ICU and her passing away.
Yeah. So that point brings me to, if someone new comes into the shop, most likely they're not going to be aware of these rules. So all of you that have attended this lecture are responsible for making sure anyone in the shop, new or a current member, that you see them abiding by these rules exactly as they're stated by EH&S. Sometimes one of us may forget one of the rules, or it may just skip over our head. It happens. That's why we have multiple people here, so we can ensure that not only is the person dealing with the chemical or equipment that they're safe, but so is everyone around us. Because one bottle causing a fire can lead to the rest of the shop catching on fire, say it reaches the fire cabinet. Now all of a sudden we have a large explosion. It's something we want to avoid, even in small amounts.
Again, it takes us into chemical and hazardous waste. So the most important point is that chemicals must never be disposed of down drains and trash or by evaporation methods. So it doesn't matter what the chemical is, we have to dispose of it in an appropriate and responsible manner. Chemical waste is required to be held at the waste satellite accumulation area. So Dylan spoke about that. It's on it'll be on one side of the SAE garage bay door. Must be stored there until ready for pickup, and the accumulation area will be identified with a sign. So for speaking specifically about chemical waste containers, they the waste must be accumulated in a sealable original container, or if we don't have the original container anymore, a steel container. So again, we can't just put something in a gallon jug because it was convenient and we found one in the shop, but we have to store it responsibly because we don't know if it's going to be there for 2 days or for 2 months before we're able to get H&S to collect it. Next point is the containers must be kept closed when they're in the acclimation area, except when adding waste to the container. That was pretty straightforward. We don't want to allow them to evaporate over time because that's just as irresponsible as dumping it outside into the environment. So that one of the goals of this program is to make sure that the bulk waste is disposed of responsibly. C says a funnel cannot be left in the containers. This is a very important point, and it's easy to violate this strictly because of laziness. We use a funnel so that we can get the waste into the primary container. So if I draw the funnel, we have a funnel like this. We pour it into the 5-gallon primary container. We cannot ever leave this funnel in there because what happens if somebody knocks this over? Obviously the lid's off, this is not sealed, so we've just violated the whole principle of having the secondary containment vessel. So that's a common fine that labs get. Just because of convenience, they leave that funnel in there, and we cannot do that. So the procedure that they'll come up with is that the funnel, I believe, you correct me if I'm wrong, will be stored inside the chemical storage cabinet, and when you need it for dispensing, this is very close, so you grab it out of here, put it in there, dispense your chemical, take it back, and replace it when you're done. That way nobody can make the mistake of just conveniently leaving it in the open container.
Right, it's not much effort. The funnel will quite literally be about 5 to 20 feet away from the chemical storage containers. It's not much effort to grab it from there or put it back in there. And at the end of the day, it may prevent a spill, and if that's all it does, then that's great. We don't want to see any spills, so let's take the extra effort to store the funnel in the fire cabinet.
We cannot overfill these containers. We need to leave at least an inch of headspace. That's measured from the top of the container. So the spill line, we need to have at least an inch of airspace up here to allow for expansion, thermal expansion. We can contact the H&S for pickup before it gets full. And this is when they come out to pick it up, they're likely going to want to do a facility inspection. So we need to be prepared for that. Alternatively, we could take it to one of the waste authorized disposal centers in town that we spoke of earlier. So this is something if you identify something that needs to be disposed of, just let the shop safety coordinator know, or let anybody on the e-board know, or let me know, and I will help you figure out how to do that in a swift manner.
Yes, and if you see that one of the chemical waste containers is getting close to having that 1 inch of headspace remaining,
Then tell us.
yes, because we don't want to wait until we have that last inch, because we may get lazy. It happens to all of us, and it may overfill past the point of that 1 inch headspace. So we want to try to get this chemical waste out of the shop before it even reaches that. So if you notice that the container is at 75% capacity, which will most likely be under the 1 inch of headspace, please notify someone, or if you're able to take care of it yourself, say one of you becomes shop manager in the future, please take care of it responsibly, dispose of it at one of the authorized disposal centers in town, or by contacting EHS. Carly?
The part where you said this is a good time for facility inspection, did you get that from some source, or is that something you're just concluding?
It's
Pretty good assumption.
yes, a good assumption, because we're telling.
We were politely given some tips by a EH&S member. So And then they want to do this to help us, right? They want to help us and help us identify, and that's what he did. He came through and did basically a mock inspection for us, and as he was going through these things, raised our awareness of this. That's something that they like to do. When they come out, it's not always a raising awareness visit. It is okay, I have to use some citations. So it's kind of like a parking ticket. Sometimes you happen to get somebody that's it's just the right time of the year that they're just going to give you a warning. Other times they have to give you a citation because it is their job.
I just feel like if that is true, wouldn't that like scare people away from calling them up to?
It can, and that's a common problem at our university, and I think others are facing. So it's really important that the university gets the right atmosphere, the right people in the in that office. Yet if there is no penalty of, in this case, I think the financial risk is really what motivates a lot of the rule compliance. If there is without that basically stick to motivate, then this trickles down to students and users of the facility not having to go that extra mile to really have a safe environment. Yeah, so you really hit the nail on the head there. It's a fine line. The next one says, don't contaminate used oil with solvents or heavy metals. So we're going to have 2 of these waste containers, 2 of the 5-gallon waste containers. One's marked oil, one's marked solvents. We don't want to. We want to try not to mix those 2. So if you're taking oil out of the car, you're taking oil out of the brake system, then that would obviously go in the oil and lubricants container. If you're using anything else like acetone or brake clean or any type of solvent, that goes in the solvent container. So we want to make sure that when EH&S looks at where we take it to dispose of it, if this is marked oil and it looks like it's got 50% of it is solvents, they're not going to really know how to process that. Same thing with the solvents. If it looks like it's got 2 gallons of oil mixed in with the solvents, then it's going to be harder for them to just accept that and dispose of it properly. So as the original users, we need to try our hardest to separate those wastes into their distinct containers.
Yes. And now there's obviously going to be times where you're going to take apart to spray oil off of it using brake clean, and you will mix the oil and the brake clean together, brake clean being the solvent. You're going to do that over the solvent container. A small amount of oil into that solvent container would be accepted, just because it's almost unavoidable. It's bound to happen with us, but if something's coated in oil, please try to first clean it off with a rag. So you'll take as much off as you can with the rag, and then you'll dispose of that rag in an oily rag container. Then you can take that part and spray it with the brake clean to get the remainder of the oil off. But you want to do your best to try to keep them separate from each other. Probably the solvent container should most likely contain less than 2% of any type of oil. Something that when they're disposing of it is not going to be crucial to their process of disposing.
Chemical waste containers must be stored in secondary containers at 110% of the volume of the primary container. We already talked about that, and we have that. The secondary container, this is an important point, it says it must remain spill-free. Clean up immediately when necessary. So this is something that we've violated in the past, and it takes conscious effort to make sure that we do this responsibly. So there's a lid in the top of this 5-gallon container. I have the funnel drawn in here for. If anything gets out of the funnel and ends up right down the side of this container, we cannot have any chemical inside the secondary containment vessel. So if that happens, then you just take this out, wipe this up, clean this up. If it's a lot of liquid, then we have the absorbent towels that are in the lab cabinet. I can show you where those are when we get back. So we're going to we have to clean this up and keep this secondary containment vessel, keep that clean and dry.
Right, and while you may never intend to spill anything into that secondary container, and while you may never see a spill, on occasion a small drop may land on the side of the primary container, and now you have, over time, some residue spilling onto the bottom. So over a period of a few months, a puddle at the bottom of both containers, so inside the secondary container, may accumulate. So you should be looking at the secondary container in use, take it out, and make sure that there's no oil in the bottom. If there is, please clean it up. And when you're cleaning it up, you may still feel some residue just because oil likes to stick to some surfaces and it's hard to get off. As long as there's no actual puddle in there, that's acceptable. Residues expected, being a secondary containment hub for oil, just make sure that there is no puddles of oil at the bottom of the container.
And the last 2 points deal with the labels. We have to have the containers labeled, so in case of emergency or just in case of normal disposal, they know what's in there. So the point H talks about listing the percentages of the contents. So for instance, in our solvents container, since we primarily use acetone and brake cleaner, was there anything else, or was that, those were the main two? What else do we use that's solvent based? That's probably 80% of the solvents that we use, acetone and brake cleaner.
Here's a big carb cleaner, but other than that.
Okay, so carb cleaner. So we need to approximate what we think those percentages are. So whoever's making up the label, I'll work with you on that. And labels are always available from EH&S. Dylan went there the other day and got a very good supply. This will last us for 2 or 3 years. So we have all those supplies.
Right. You can call EHS at the number listed on this document, and they'll gladly ship the labels to our lab. Or you can go to their facility, which you can look up building 831. It's on the surge area in the southwest corner of campus. They'll gladly give you even a stack of 100 labels. Walk into their office and they have thousands and thousands of these labels. It's extremely expensive or extremely inexpensive for them to get, and so they'd be glad to give us however many we want. Maybe not a million, but they give us a decent stack. Asking for 2 or 3. When I went there on Thursday, the guy kind of chuckled and said, "Here, I'll give you a large stack." So they have plenty to give.
Okay, so we need to use their labels and fill out all the information I asked for, including my name as the shop supervisor and the building room number. So again, I'll have to fill that out as necessary. So moving on, aerosols. So aerosols are something that we use a lot in the shop. Says that these aerosol solvents and cleaners must be sprayed over the solvent waste container to ensure the solvent doesn't get on the ground, in a trash can, in a drain, etc. So when you're doing this, you're going to open the lid on the secondary containment vessel. Take that, set that aside. Then you're going to open the lid on the 5-gallon solvents waste container. I've just drawn a little schematic of a spray can, so you're going to put your part over if you're cleaning it, just hold it over that bucket. So obviously the bucket will catch everything. When you're done, immediately put the lid back on the bucket, on the primary container, and then put the lid back on the secondary container. Yeah, we need that immediately. We never want to have a situation where we leave one of these lids off, because then that's just going to allow the volatile solvents to evaporate. And again, that's not helping the environment. And that's really what a lot of these rules are in place to do. We need to responsibly track our waste solvents.
Right, and when you're using one of these containers, please try to remember that because this does have chemical waste in it, and especially that the solvent fumes are pretty hazardous, opening the container, if your face is by it, it's pretty toxic and it can get you pretty dizzy. So remember to open it, keep your face away, don't try to sniff any of the fumes because it's pretty potent. And always expect chemicals to be in there. Even if it feels light, there may be, say, a couple milliliters in there, and because they're in there, a lot of it may just be fumes rather than liquid. Still opening it, you get all those fumes in your face, it's not going to make you feel well. And also do this away from any welding or angle grinding, anything where there's flames or sparks, because those spark can go and hit one of those fumes and cause a fire.
Yeah. Yes, Kyle?
What about spray paints? That's something we use a lot in the shop. Are they
Yeah.
supposed to be sprayed over?
Spray paint should be sprayed in an area where there is an exhaust fan.
What about,
Okay.
traditionally we do it outside.
Proper ventilation. So doing it outside, we cannot condone that.
Okay.
There is good ventilation outside, but we need to have a way to collect all the product when it cures. So if you were to do it outside, you make sure you put down a large piece of visqueen that can capture the dry solids. Same thing in the shop. We would put down a large piece of visqueen, so that way it doesn't get on the equipment and the floor. and the fumes are taken care of with proper ventilation.
Alright,
The energy park is a good place to paint them because you don't have to worry about people walking by and stepping on what you're doing or else being in someone else's way. And there's plenty of room out there to put a nice large piece of visqueen to responsibly catch everything.
It's just, for like smaller components, we've traditionally just done them in the tree outside.
So the welding shop is a good solution, right? We've got a nice big table, just put down a piece of visqueen, it can be the same piece, we just fold it up like tablecloth. Just lay it down, turn on the exhaust fan, paint it, and it's all taken care of. Luther, to the point?
Yeah, the aerosol cans, I know in the past I've sometimes used like brake clean, put it on like paper towel or something.
Yeah.
To then go wipe something off and
Yeah.
just like blast the part. What would be the proper procedure there? Did you just switch to acetone or like spray the rag over the solvent?
Hold your rag right here over the solvents can. So again, we want to have a procedure in place to show that we are trying to collect everything that potentially, all the solvent waste that we potentially generate. So we would want to apply the solvent to the rag over the solvents container and then go to our item.
What do you do with the rag? Is that,
We have two containers. One is marked same way. One is going to be marked oil. One is marked solvents.
so the yellow
And
one's
we
solvent?
dispose of them in the appropriate bin.
It will be a steel container, so it may not be yellow. So just look for the appropriate label. No, not yet, but
We have some plastic bins.
yeah. But
HMS would like us to have steel ones. Makes sense. So we'll
Yes.
get some steel ones.
and the containers will also be sealed. That's actually mentioned later in the document. And I might as well mention this now while the question is presented. If you have the rag and it's still, say, covered in acetone, where if you put it in the container, some of that will seep to the bottom, you don't want to have that because an accumulation of the waste at the bottom of that container, well, it's not an appropriate waste, hazardous waste container. So you want to make sure that if it is still coated in a lot of the solvent, you take it over to the hazardous waste container, then squeeze it out using appropriate gloves to make sure you're not getting them on your hand. So you squeeze it dry into that waste container, then dispose of it in the appropriate container for the rags. So that brings us to our next point with oily rags. Oily rags must be disposed of in an oily rags container. They cannot be placed on the lids of garbage cans. So that's a frequent problem that we've seen. Okay, so yes, we want the container sealed at all times. It's easy for someone to walk away and accidentally leave the container sealed. So always make sure that this is sealed. And again, as I mentioned, make sure that there's no waste that accumulates at the bottom. Squeeze all rags into the appropriate chemical waste container that you will be throwing in there. Now, aerosol can disposal. Completely empty cans can be placed in the trash. Simple as that. It may be surprising, but that's the standard that EH&S has set out. Non-empty cans must be placed in a sealed container labeled with hazardous waste and picked up by EHS. With that, anytime you do it, please remove the nozzle. You don't want a bunch of aerosol cans in the same container just bumping into each other, and that can cause unintentional discharges. And what you'll notice with some aerosol cans is that even if you take off the nozzle, there's still a little white plastic piece that the nozzle is connected to. If you can't remove it, do so as well, because you can still press down on that white piece and spray some of the liquids out. If you can't pull it out, I'm sure it would be completely acceptable to take a pair of scissors and then just cut the nozzle as short as you can, so there's less of a chance of it spraying unintentionally.
Okay, that takes us into fire safety. So university issued fire extinguishers must always be clearly visible. So you'll see several that are around the shop. The main one for an SAE space is right by the small entry door. And that's the primary one that this rule applies to, because it's easy to stack things up in front of it. It's a convenient floor space in a place where our floor space is highly coveted. But we must understand that if we can't clearly identify where the extinguisher is in case of emergency, in case something does go up, it does ignite, and we need to put the fire out, that's not the time to try and figure out where the fire extinguisher goes. They can't see it behind all the boxes that are stacked in front of it.
Right, and what I've done is I have placed yellow and black hazard tape in that area. So the area where the yellow and black hazard tape is, that's supposed to be blocking off where you cannot store any sort of container, anything in general. So we must have that walking space there. So if you see anything blocking the walking space, please move it to the appropriate area that it should be, or contact someone to ask them where it should be, because there must be access to that fire extinguisher. And the reason why that fire extinguisher we must have access to it, as opposed to even if we had 20 fire extinguishers of our own set up on the laser table right by that fire extinguisher, this fire extinguisher is checked by EH&S. They do several inspections. They range from monthly to yearly inspections to ensure that that fire extinguisher is still safe and can still operate. Even if you see that this fire extinguisher has been in the shop since the 90s and you're wondering how can it still possibly be good, it's because they're doing these inspections to make sure that it's still in working standards.
Okay. So other fire safety rules. Everyone must know how to operate a fire extinguisher, so we can go over that when we walk back to the shop. It just has a safety pin that you pull, and then it's got a trigger that you pull. When you discharge the extinguisher, you want to aim it at the base of the fire. If there's ever any doubt as to whether you should use the extinguisher, then use it. The university keeps me here for a reason. They would much rather hear, yeah, we had something, we thought it was going to need it, we used it, you need to refill it, that's fine. It served its purpose. So don't wait to see, oh, is someone else going to be able to put this out by blowing on it like a cake candle. Use the extinguishers if you need them, and make sure that you feel comfortable doing that as a user of our facility. Okay, if you don't, talk to any of us, and we'll show you how to use one properly.
And also spray the fire extinguisher in a sweeping motion and stand a far enough distance away so you won't receive any burns. And on pretty much all fire extinguishers, if you look on the side, it will have instructions on how to use it. All fire extinguishers are fairly the same, whereas Mike said, you pull the pin, aim at the base of the fire, spray, sweep, stand a safe enough distance away, and that's the simplicity of using the fire extinguisher.
Chemicals should never be used in the welding shop while welding is taking place. So we went through the example of that before, so this should make a lot of sense to us now. As users of the chemicals in our facility, you need to make sure that you're enforcing this each and every time. If welding is performed in the lab, a 10-foot radius, oops, that one was updated right before the meeting, a 10-foot radius needs to be cleared out around the area. So an example, a few years ago, we had a student that was doing, started out TIG welding something, which doesn't generate any sparks, and then that changed into, well, I need to get this done quicker, so I'm going to use the MIG welder instead. He didn't pay attention to the location of one of the mobile trash cans, and a spark went into the trash can and ignited the trash can. So we need to, again, whoever's doing the welding, survey the area, make sure that there's nothing in the vicinity that could catch fire. That includes, rags, and anything that a rag hasn't been put away properly. That has you're not going to know what's on it. Just assume that it has a volatile substance that if it comes into contact with a flame or a spark, it's going to ignite.
Yeah, that trash can also had brake clean sprayed in it right before that happened, so that's part of the reason too. But
Yes, and that's something as
You
we
see how violating one rule can lead to the accident, and that's usually what does happen. It's not one rule necessarily that's broken, but rather two in sequence that leads to a serious problem. Okay, laboratory equipment. This one's pretty straightforward. If you're using the compressed gas cylinders, that means if you're putting them on or off the welders, or you find a need to transport them in the lab, then familiarize yourself with the rules. They'll be laminated and placed on the compressed gas tanks that are used in the shop. But basically, they just tell us how to ensure that there's no way a bottle can tip over with an unprotected valve, where the valve could be knocked off the bottle and turn that bottle into basically a missile. One of those compressed gas cylinders can go right through a concrete wall. They have that much pressure inside them, so they just give us some tips for handling the bottles safely. So again, you'll find those on the bottles. If you have any questions, then come talk to me about that.
And I've also placed this document in a binder labeled SAE Shop Safety Guide. It's located right next to the MSDS folder on top of the fire cabinet. in that folder, you also see this document that we're presenting right now, as well as any document we reference during this lecture. So with that, there is a chemical waste guide written by EHS, a lab safety guide also written by EHS, how to deal with fires, personal injuries, and chemical spills. So all of those will be located in this folder, and you can access them at any time you need to.
Second point says compressed gas cylinders must be supported by a secure chain attached to the upper third of the tank. So when they're being stored on the welders, it's not acceptable to use string, bungee cord, etc. Pieces of wire. Yes, the teams in the past teams have used all of those to attach the tanks. So all of our welders have been upgraded so that they have proper chains on them to support them securely. So we need to use those. We would never leave a freestanding tank in the lab anywhere. We have to chain it to the wall, so there's no way someone could walk by, bump into it, and knock it over. Third one is extension cords running across public areas where there's foot traffic must be secured to prevent tripping hazards. So we have some caution tape, duct tape works, anything, so that if you have to run an extension cord across the floor for some reason, you want to be mindful that you're not going to create a tripping hazard that causes somebody else to get seriously injured. If you take out an extension cord, make sure you put it away before you leave the shop that night. Again, if you find yourself taking out an extension cord multiple times for the same thing, like every time you come into the shop, then tell somebody, and that just means that we should have an electrician come in and add an outlet that's more conveniently located for you. Yes, Luther?
With the TIG welder, there's 3 or 4 wires that have to get strung to wherever the welding is, and that's usually across traffic to keep the TIG machine out of the way.
What I would suggest is that since those cables are large in diameter, that you wrap those, you just run a loop of the caution tape around it, so at least we've increased the visibility to try and mitigate the tripping risk. And also when you're done using it, you put it back away, unhook the cable for the night. So don't leave it if the welder has to leave the shop. Just don't leave it out.
And also remember that when you're ever routing any type of cord, whether it's from the TIG welder or an extension cord, do not route it around a sharp corner, under anything that may press against it. Anything that can cause wire damage, we don't want to have that happen. I'm very protective of my wires on the car, but we should also be protective of the wires that we use to use any of the equipment, because there may be damage to the conductors inside that cord that we may not be able to see, or there can be damage to the insulation that will then expose the conductors, and if someone happens to pick that up while it's still plugged in, they have the potential of getting shocked or
Electrocuted.
Yeah.
Yeah, very serious.
Did you have a comment?
I did, but never mind.
Okay. And the last one, the manufacturer's operating manual should be kept with the instrument or with the equipment, and that is so that you can reference it. And if you're using something, you should be aware of the risk. Just like if you use a lathe or a mill in the shop, or a drill press, or a grinder or a sander, we take you through the safety. So basically, we give you these safety rules. But there'll be times when you're using something that wasn't covered in the basic training. So you need to familiarize yourself with the safety so that you can use it in a responsible and safe manner. SAE will have a file in I believe a dedicated file in the file cabinet where they keep all the manuals in one place, so they're convenient for you to locate. That takes us into food and drinks. And basically this says if the lab, any portion of the shop is a place where chemicals are dispensed or used, it cannot be a place where we eat food. So EHS is pretty clear on that. If there are dedicated areas, let's say the team decides, I think you're still in discussion about this, the team decided that, I'm not even going to continue on that. We're going to finalize policy on food and drink so that we are in compliance, and we can do it in a way that causes the least amount of inconvenience to our team. We understand it is a privilege to be able to bring something into the shop and eat it in classes, or when you're running there for a meeting. So we would like to continue that, but we have to make sure that we can do it in a way that's responsible and in full compliance.
Yes. And if you happen to be bringing food into the shop, aside from making sure you don't bring it into the work areas, such as onto the welding table or by the laser table, Also make sure you clean up after yourself. It's sometimes gets really disgusting when people leave their trash around. It can just be a Coke container, or it can be leftover food. We've seen before that people have left out 5 bags from Five Guys, mostly empty, but there's still, say, mustard, ketchup, and pickles in there. And over time, that just starts smelling really bad, and it's just a disgusting habit. So always pick up after yourself. Eating in the shop is a privilege. Mike will have no problem taking this privilege away from us, and anytime he catches someone eating in the shop, he'll kindly ask them to leave or just kick them out. Now, oftentimes people go and say go to Chipotle to get food there. If need be, it may turn into you have to eat at Chipotle. Either way, you're still eating, so there's still that same eating time and that same amount of travel time, so if you can, try to avoid eating in the shop. In fact, it's probably a cleaner environment for you to eat at the restaurant. Or if you're bringing food to the shop and you don't want to be eating in the shop, there is a table outside the shop across the street that you can kindly eat your pizza on with your buddy.
Final comment, if you do bring food into the shop, put it in the trash can that's in the bathroom. That trash can is emptied every morning, so the food, as it wastes, as it spoils, there's no chance that it can sit in a trash can that's just partially full for a week while until it fills up to the volume that the team disposes of it. Okay, so I'll always put your food trash in the bathroom trash can.
Yes, and to go with this point, that's also going to the next topic, deals with chemical transportation and cross-contamination. So if we do say the lab table area is our designated eating area, as well as any public area. Public area is the bathroom, the eating area, or any common area. You're not allowed to bring chemicals through there, or in fact you can't even bring your gloves or lab coat. So if you're working at the wood shop, working on some composites, and decide to go over to the lab tables, you need to first take off your coat and take off the gloves, and then you can proceed to go into this public area. Likewise, if you need to transport chemicals, and the quickest option for you is to just go straight through the public area, public heating area, that's unacceptable. Take the extra time to walk around to avoid any cross-contamination, because for all you know, you may spill something onto the tables, and some people follow the 5-second policy with food. I don't know why, but still, if there's a chemical on the table and you don't know about it and you're eating and say a french fry falls, it can pick up some of that chemical. Now, for all you know, you're eating oil and acetone. Or you're still probably eating oil with your french fries, but not the oil on top.
Okay, that takes us into miscellaneous. So we want to minimize or avoid trip hazards. Electrical cords we spoke about. Material storage is an important one. Don't put something down to store it. Don't just push it away because it's out of your work area. Think about how the flow of traffic moves through the shop. And if you were, think about it, if you had low light condition and you were trying to move across the SAE shop, is there something that you would trip on? Or not just SAE shop, but the regular shop. Is there something that you would trip on? So we want to think about how we store the materials in the shop. Aisles can't be used for storage for the same reason. So whether it's the fire marshal, whether it's EH&S, they come through and do inspections. They want to make sure that as customers, as the users of our facility, the students and the staff can evacuate quickly if necessary. Spills must be cleaned up immediately. We spoke about that already. It doesn't matter whether it's water or acetone or brake clean or oil. We have to clean it up immediately. We need to keep all work areas clean. And the reason here, the cleaner it is, the less chance of having an accident, accidentally tipping over a can of chemical. If I was being diligent to keep it clean and put the chemical back in the cabinet, now it's not there for me to hit with a long tube of material if I'm trying to coat it with a frame or do a myriad of the other tasks that we do in the lab. So it's not just for appreciation that we have a place on campus to work when a lot of other groups don't. It's not just an appreciation of that we want to keep it clean, but because it does tie into safety. When they come through for an inspection, it's like taking the car to our design event. If the judges see a car, it looks like a complete pile of junk, and it looks like it was thrown together last minute and nobody cared about it, they're not gonna care about seeing it, so they're already gonna be in a bad mood. And inspectors that come through, they're human too, so if it looks like we don't care about it, if it looks like we're pigs, if it looks like we don't even know what the policies are, then they're going to be a lot more strict when they try and enforce them in our lab and bring them to our attention and give us citations, because that's what we'll need at that point for our awareness, so that we can become respectful and responsible operators of our facility.
Right, so keeping the work area clean is more than just putting your chemicals away after use. It also applies to putting tools away, putting parts away in the appropriate container or cabinet. You want to keep the tables as clean as possible. So oftentimes, someone may be working on some composites and you'll leave them on the table overnight. Now, one part on the table overnight may not be much, but you have to remember, we have over 20 people working in the shop. If each person leaves one part out overnight, all of a sudden the tables become clustered with a bunch of parts, tools that people may forget to put away. So do your best to put at the appropriate spot for where you're storing it, because at the end of the year, we're all actually going to store it on our shelves or somewhere. There's going to be a spot where you need to store it other than just on the tables. Recently we cleaned the shop to be more presentable to someone that gave a speech, and I looked in the shop and I see all the tables are cleared of all these parts, all these tools. So at this moment, it's completely doable to store everything in an appropriate spot. So if it's doable now, it's doable the rest of the year as well as every year to come. So put it in a designated spot. If you can't find a spot to put it in, try to clear out some space on one of the shelves to try to create some space. I took the time to clean out the shelves some time ago, and easily I cleaned up about 3 or 4 feet of space on one of the shelves, which that's enough space to store a lot of parts. So times we may have parts that were from the previous year that we may not use. So look through it and try to find something that we may not use. If you're not sure about it, ask someone. So create space for you to put your part.
The next point, Dylan already touched on electrical cords. They can't be run across floors, under rugs, through walls, doors, windows, ceiling tiles, etc. So anywhere that presents a hazard where they could get cut or the conductors could be damaged, we can't do that. Again, if you find yourself running an extension cord for more than just general purpose, you're doing the same thing over and over, then let us know and we'll have a receptacle put in, and like a drop-down receptacle where it's conveniently located for you to eliminate that trip hazard. For sharps, broken glass, razor blades, anything else like that that could cut somebody who's handling that waste, those must be placed in a red plastic sharps container and disposed of as biomedical waste, regardless of whether or not they have biological fluids on them. That's a university policy. And for us, an alternative for uncontaminated razor blades, meaning something that has not come in contact with any blood, is to carefully dull them using a grinder, and then we can put them in the steel trash can, the steel welding shop trash can, because that trash is disposed of in a different way. It goes to a steel receptacle where all that material is recycled by an outside vendor, so that doesn't apply to standard waste disposal. So it's one or the other. Either you put sharps in a designated container that Dylan created in the SAE shop, or try and dull them, put them in the steel trash can in the welding shop.
And the sharps container will be located on top of the fire cabinet. At the current moment, it may move to a easier spot to access. It's a red container, it should be easy to see. Again, it will be labeled sharp, so always dispose of any sharp objects that you can't dull down and put in the steel container in the fire cabinet. You can put them in the sharps container. Yes, Luther?
Does this mean razor blades are not one-time use?
No. The containers we have for the razor blades, you can still put the razor blades back in the container.
We don't want to open drawers in our work boxes or tool boxes and see razor blades everywhere.
Right.
Which is something that happens as we get close to competition. Oh, I need a razor blade for this, I need one for that. And we just say, we'll put them in the toolbox because we're going to reuse them, because they're not just one-time use for general purpose stuff in our shop. So we cannot do that. If somebody reaching in there, obviously, that presents a cut hazard. So we don't want to have the H&S open a toolbox and see that, and obviously nobody wants to get cut. So we either put the used blades back in the blade receptacle, back in the container, so you use them multiple times, or if you pick something up and you know, oh, I need to trim these letters out, this vinyl out, and it's dull, this is useless to me, and you have the intention, I'm going to throw this out, you can't just put it in a normal trash can. You have to put it in a sharps container or dispose it in the welding shop trash can.
Okay, that brings us to, actually, number
Yeah, the
7.
last point, operation.
Yes.
If you're doing anything that's going to run overnight, let me know. I need to know. We need to put up a sign on the door, and we'll deal with it individually. So just bring that to my attention. Don't leave something like a vacuum pump running overnight. I need to know that there's power consumption going on. We need to leave the lights on. Yes.
Back to the power cords.
Yes.
My neighbors are on the ground. Well, I know like when we get really busy around the lap tables and there's
Yep.
several of the laptops.
Yep.
There's not enough power outlets, and we run the extension cord on the ground. Is that
Yep.
going to prevent
So
a hazard?
that same question came up, and you're absolutely right. So we're going to have another drop-down receptacle added. So it's right there, centrally located for the projector, for our meetings, our design meetings, and for laptop use. An excellent point. So you see that, you've identified. We do that a lot. There's probably a better way. Yeah, and there is. So that's what we're going to have done.
Or if that is necessary for the work that you're doing, take some of the safety tape or duct tape at the very least and take down the electrical cord. That way it's clearly visible. The extension cord we have is yellow, so you can easily see it, but we want to have it secured firmly to the floor, so that way no one gets caught above their foot and then ends up tripping on that, as well as pulling the cords down with them, which could knock down some laptops and knock over some other stuff that we may not want knocked over. In fact, we don't want anything knocked over.
All right, so general safety. We already touched on this, all safety-related info. Dylan said it's going to be clearly labeled and stored in an area where it can be easily found. So there's going to be a couple of notebooks. Are they all going to be stored on top of the chemical storage cabinet? So the MSDS is close to the other notebooks, Dylan? It's all going to be right there, so everything's in one place.
Yes. It's a half-inch white notebook.
So everyone knows where the yellow cabinet is, so it's easy to find. How to deal with chemical spills, basic injuries, etc. There's a document. Just read, if you know, you want to be able to respond. If somebody gets seriously injured, you want to be able to help that person, right? Just as a friend, as a team member. So this document gives us some outlines, basic responses to injuries. And it also talks about how to deal with chemical spills. For us, chemical spills are going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to use a rag or a couple rags to wipe that up, and then we put the rags in the right container, the rag container. Or we can use some absorbent material, kind of like kitty litter. There's a spill kit on top of the chemical storage cabinet. Spill kit, 5-gallon container. That has some absorbent, so we can throw that down quickly. It'll absorb it. Then we can pick that up and put it in a container, just a steel container. We can put it in a plastic bucket. We can put it in something so that it can go to the hazardous waste site that we have in the shop. We can use, if it's a lot of product that's on the floor, a lot of chemical, we can use a mop, and then the mop is going to go in the bucket, so it can be disposed of. Or we have the 12-inch by 12-inch absorbent mats that are in the chemical storage cabinet of the lab. So I'll probably buy a bunch for SAE as well, and we'll keep those up here. So again, everything's going to be in one place, so that'll be your go-to place if you have a spill. Thorough discussion of injury handling is going to be in a separate document. It's common injuries that members or users of our facility could sustain. We want to know how to respond to that. Something we're putting together for the lab, for all the TA training as well.
And in some of the first aid kits, well actually all the first aid kits that we have, there is a booklet on how to deal with basic injuries. Basic injury can range from a cut, and they usually extend past that, say how to deal with someone that has spinal injuries or an object in their eye. So if you ever need to know how to deal with the injury, you'll look at that. And it's also good to familiarize yourself with where the first aid kits and eye washing stations are in the shop. So in the shop we have 4 first aid kits. One is located by the main entrance to the SAE shop, and another is in the bathroom. Those are the 2 that are have most stock in it, and we want to try to use those first. Another one is located by the Baja cart that is to the right of the welding area, or welding shop when you're looking at the welding shop and the bay doors. And the third is a first aid kit that we'll be bringing to the track. Currently it's located underneath the laser table. It's a yellow fishing toolbox. So it has a first aid label on it. So if there is an emergency where you have to use it, please help yourself to using that. It's first aid, like bandages, anything in there is replaceable. Injuries may not be. So use what you can, or use what you need to deal with the first aid situation. As for eye washing stations, there is one above the first aid kit on the SAE side by the bay door. There's one by the rotisserie by the lab tables, in between the lab tables and the Lathan mills. And then there's two inside the bathroom. And I believe that's all, as well as a stock of supplies in one of the cabinets by the bay door on Mike's side, which all the first aid kits will have an inventory kept track for them, and anytime we run below the mandatory or the supplies that we need, we'll stock up on them. So some of these supplies we'll have to go out and buy at Walmart or Target. It's actually cheaper to go out and buy from them as opposed to buying it through EHS. So keep that in mind.
And that takes us to what we've done today. It's mostly training sessions. So we just want everybody to go through this meeting once, and we'll probably ask you each semester just to spend a few minutes reviewing this document, so we can identify anything that we may have been lax on, and also we can reinforce these rules with each other. So just a couple reminders. Never use chemicals alone. Only use them in designated work areas with proper ventilation. We're going to always use proper personal protective equipment, so gloves, lab coats, and respirators. So if you can smell the stuff that you're working with, that means you want to take the time and wear a proper respirator. If you're doing something where you're generating carbon dust with the carbon fiber, you don't want to breathe that, so use a particulate respirator. Anytime you can't find the PPE that you need, then come talk to me, and I'll make sure that I get it for you. Always use catch cans underneath, or pouring cans, however we want to refer to them, underneath all containers when dispensing chemicals. So again, plan that you're going to leak some. So have something there to catch it responsibly so that it's easy for you to clean up. Only leave the caps off containers long enough to dispense them. Know in advance what to do if you do have a major spill. So think ahead, and if you're using something you're not sure, if I get a bunch of this on the floor, how am I going to clean this up? Then let's get a plan together before you open that chemical. Know where the nearest sink and safety shower are. The department will be installing a safety shower in the lab. That'll probably be, obviously be close to the bathroom area. That's not there yet. We talked about chemical spill responses, different ways to clean them up. First aid response, Dylan touched on. And obviously we've gone through this document now, and we're back at our table showing the incompatibilities, different materials we don't want to store together.
Yes, and so for this lecture, it's important that you retain all the information that you just heard. If we find that you're consistently violating some of the rules that were listed in this document, whether it's something large or something small, you may be required to, or you will be required to watch this lecture again, as well as take a written test. So this test may be about 30 minutes just to confirm that you know the information that we presented. Because if you didn't catch it the first time, how will we know you didn't catch it the second? So keep that in mind, that you want to avoid having to spend another 2 hours watching this lecture and taking this test. So do your best to abide by all the points that were noted in this document and that we have mentioned to you outside of just the points listed. And again, also make sure that anyone working in the shop, if you see them violating something, kindly tell them that you're doing this wrong, you should do this instead of what you're doing, to prevent them from doing something wrong that may get us a fine, so that new members or current members. In worst case scenario, if it's something serious, we may limit any equipment or chemical usage with a member because they're consistently violating the points that have been presented to them. So with that, at the end of watching this document, or watching this lecture, or at the end of this lecture if you attended it, we're going to have a sign-up sheet for you to write your name down on, so we know that you have watched this lecture in full, so we can mark you off for our shop training guide lecture.
Are we gonna be able to like access this document if we just wanna look at it and stuff?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have some printed copies in the shop, and we'll also have it in the safety section of our forum. So we realize this is like the first time we're formally trying to introduce such a structured safety policy. So week by week, we want to have some inspections and in an encouraging way bring it up at our Sunday meeting. Talk about, okay, this week we saw this was left out, or we didn't do this right, so we're gonna be reminding everybody. But we need you to if you're not comfortable with anything, you don't understand it, then ask us questions, because this is vital for your safety. Obviously, I use the examples. The students have gotten killed by violating some of these rules, and second, it's vital for our program. So we're not trying to catch you so we can boot you out, but we do need everybody to care about the safety, so that we can help each other enforce it, right? Have a safe and enjoyable facility to work in.
So, as I stated sometime earlier in this presentation, this document will be printed out and put in the binder labeled SAE Shop Safety Guide, which will be located to the MSDS sheet on top of the fire cabinet, and as well as every document that we have referenced in this presentation. So that's the Shop Safety Guide, chemical waste management, chemical spill, personal injury, fire control, compressed gas cylinder usage, and any document that we may add to it. So we do have a designated safety binder for you to reference. And so I think that's it.
Yeah, and we realize it's a lot. There's a lot of information here. So we thank you for taking your time. I know this isn't an exciting meeting. It's over 2 hours to talk about safety, but it's vital for everybody. You wouldn't want to see someone you care about get hurt, and obviously we don't want to see the program get shut down, and we don't want to be contributors to hurting our environment. So, many reasons why we want to try and be in full compliance. Any questions? All right. So again, thank you for your time.
And also, if I can have everyone just type their name on my computer, or actually, it's my computer.